Authentic Talks is all about authentic conversations. This show is all about growth, love, respect, success, mind, body, and spirit. If you're looking to grow and become your authentic self, then this is the podcast for you. And I am your host, Shantae. Welcome to the show. Hi, you guys. Welcome back to Authentic Talks. I'm really excited about today's episode because we're talking all about astrology. Today's guest, you guys, decided at a young age that this is what she wanted to learn about. She went to college for it. It seemed a little difficult, and she's going to tell you about her story of how she ended up back in astrology. Growing up, I oftentimes would be asked questions like, what is your sign? And so very early in life, I understood that with my birthday and month that I was actually a Capricorn. And so today we're talking a little bit beyond just like what you read about your horoscope in the newspaper and things of that nature. So today's guest gets into it a little bit deeper. But before we get started, you guys, I have to share with you, anybody listening in that is born in the month of December and it's around the time that Capricorn comes into play, I'm sure everybody tuning in at some point has understood what your birth sign is and have read something to see, does this sound like it could apply to me? And for today, August the 18th, mine says getting more closely connected with the people you really value is easier than ever. Right now, everyone's schedules fit together and everyone is on the same page. This harmony is sure going to make your life sweeter for a while. Communicate with them in every way you can, from handwritten notes to video chats to in person if you can. They are going to add some good energy to your life, and who doesn't need that? So I just thought I would read mine to you guys. These are the kind of things that sometimes growing up that we were told not to read, not to delve in these types of things, you know, like horoscopes and your sign and all of that. But I wanted to find out a little bit more about this. So that's why I invited today's guest on to find out, is it real? Is astrology real? Is it really real? What is it? All right, you guys. So let's go ahead and get this show on the road. Please welcome today's guest, Leslie Hale, who is an astrologist who's been practicing for over 17 years, you guys. Please welcome Leslie to the show. Hi, Leslie. Welcome to Authentic Talks.
Well, thanks for having me.
I'm excited to have you. Can you please introduce yourself to the audience?
Sure. My name is Leslie Hale, and I am a practicing astrologer on Keen.com.
Wow, this is exciting. You're the first astrologer that I have on the show.
Well, good.
I know. Can we start off with you explaining to everyone, what is astrology?
Astrology has been around for, God knows, thousands of years, and basically it postulates that the natural world and we as human beings in it are affected by the movements of the sun, moon, stars, and planets as they move through the heavens. And who we are is basically shaped by the position of where the planets were at the time of our birth and place of birth, of course. And we're affected throughout life by the transits of the planets as they move through the sky and affect our individual natal charts that we were born with.
Is that associated with like the sign that's...
No, it's associated with the sign. And of course, most people know their signs, but there's so much more to it as well. Depending on your time of birth, you also have an ascendant. And your ascendant, well, we know that by the time of birth and of course the place of birth as well. So your ascendant is different from your sun sign. Your ascendant is basically your first house, which shows the astrologer you, and you might say who you are personally and that kind of thing. And your ascendant is thought of as the image you project to the world, or you could say the face you project to the world. For example, I'm a Libra ascendant, but I'm a Cancer sun sign. So I come across as a Libra, but in my soul, I'm a Cancer. And so that is how we use the time of birth. And of course, the first house, it goes 1 through 12, and we begin with the first house. if we don't know your time of birth, we can always go by your sun sign. And that actually pretty much matches up as well, but we can just get so much more information if we know your time of birth.
Wow, that's really interesting. Astrology has been around forever. Like
It has.
Yeah, I find it all interesting.
I think I've been doing this for such a long time. I started out when I was about 17. That was a long time ago. And every day I find out something new. It's a continual learning process. And I think it's just the most interesting thing in the world, really, or one of them anyway.
Mm-hmm. Since you were 17, how'd you become so passionate?
I don't know. I just had a natural kind of interest in it. And then I went to college and actually took a course in it, which I had to quit because I just thought it was way too complicated. So it was about 10 years after that I met the person who basically taught me astrology, and I picked it up again. And I guess I became passionate about it when I discovered that it really works.
So is astrology real?
It's absolutely real. We can tell you so much about your personality, what is going to happen. Really, there's not much that astrology can't predict. So it's very much real, and it's a lot more than, of course, it's a lot more than the horoscopes you read in the newspapers. Those, well, some of them aren't bad, but they just kind of touch on, the most basic thing. And since everybody has a different ascendant, it doesn't always match up.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. So oftentimes when you read them, it almost can apply to anyone, some of the horoscopes.
Right.
I've read another sign and I'm like, oh, that sounds like what I'm going through right now. So yeah, does astrology have anything to do with the moon, or am I mixing two different things together?
No, absolutely. Some of the most important things that we look at in a horoscope would be, of course, your sun sign, your ascendant based on your time of birth. The moon has to do with your emotional life. Again, we've got to know your time to know your moon. If we don't know your time of birth, well, the moon might change signs that day, or maybe it's in one sign all day. It's hard to know, but unless we look at it. But no, your moon is your emotional life. It's sort of, what you're looking for emotionally, you might say. And it also describes your early childhood, and it describes your mother. In a man's chart, the moon would describe his wife or his future wife.
Wow, that's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
In what ways have people used astrology in the past?
I think people have used astrology for just about anything. It goes back so many thousands of years. Actually, we're looking at maybe 30,000 to 10,000 BC. And at that time, mainly it was the kings and queens, who had astrologers and court astrologers. And back then it was, considered more, just looking at the astrology of the country and of the ruler of the country, you might say. And then as we began to advance and come into, life as we know it now, people became much more interested as individuals. Probably, I'm going to say about the 1600s, 1700s, people became interested in having their chart read to know, what their future held, basically, who they would marry, that kind of thing. So I don't think there's anything really that at some point in time somebody hasn't asked an astrologer.
Mm-hmm. I know growing up, my mother sometimes would go, and I know she would read like the horoscopes. She would go, I'm just sharing with you all the different things that she's done. She would go like to a person who would look at her palm and tell her something. She definitely would reach out to astrologers, and people who could tell her things about the future. And we were the type of kids that had to get like the van to pick us up to go to church every Sunday. And we were taught that astrology was taboo, and it was something that we shouldn't really believe in. Why do you think in Christianity that it's so taboo?
That's a good question, and I don't know I can answer it. I'll try. I think, well, not number one, I think there are so many different interpretations of the Bible. Some of them talk about only God knows the future, that kind of thing. Beyond that, I'm not really sure, to be honest. I grew up in the Lutheran church, and I was thinking about it this morning. I don't think there was ever a time that anyone said anything in the Lutheran church about astrology. If they did, it just kind of went over my head. And of course, the greatest story in Christianity, which has to do with the birth of Christ, it does mention astrologers because the Magi were astrologers and they followed the star to find Jesus Christ. Beyond that, I'm just not sure what the reasons are. I don't subscribe to them. I think the Gnostics, have a different approach to it altogether. I would sort of go along with that. I personally don't see where there's a conflict. And of course, one of the, beginning statements in the Bible is, and God created the heavens and the earth. So I think that's part of the natural world. I personally think that it's kind of like a blueprint to knowing, where we're going and what we're going to experience in our life.
Do you think that it can help us with self-improvement and self-development? And if so, in what ways?
I absolutely think that it can. Number one, I think it can help you to understand yourself better. I think many of us, especially in these sort of difficult times, we're trying to gain a deeper insight into our own life, into our own traits and characteristics, not only of ourselves, but of others as well. And I also think that sometimes we have certain blind spots, you might say, in our own personalities. Nobody is perfect, and that's just a fact. And I think astrology can offer a look at some of the things in our charts that we can maybe look at a little bit more objectively. I have many clients from all walks of life, and I'll give you an example. Someone born with, say, their moon square Neptune. This is there's nothing that's really bad or good. And I have seen people take some of the worst transits that they were born with in their chart and turn them into the best part of their personality and make a great success of themselves with it. So it's just a matter of understanding yourself, coming to grips with who you really are, and then working on making it work for you. Mm-hmm. So some of the women that have called me with their moon square Neptune, what this really means is that a lot of times you have a lot of let's just say, a lack of clarity about your own emotional life. And we talk about that and go on. And of course, a lot of them have a lack of clarity about their love life as well. And if you go much deeper into it, you start to discover that, there's sort of, in some ways, that transit, it might make somebody kind of naive or susceptible to, believing anything anybody tells them, that kind of thing. On the other hand, it's a totally creative and intuitive aspect. As a matter of fact, Walt Disney had it, and he certainly made a success of his life with it. And I think that, once you can look at some of these things and begin talking about them, the moon square Neptune, well, you've got to sometimes get a grasp on your personal life with that a little bit more. And instead of, just sort of looking at the rainbow and hoping for the best, hoping things will turn out when you're in a situation that, logically, it just isn't going to turn out the way you want it to. I think we can, look at certain things, certain blind spots in our chart. I think we can rise above many things and make a greater success of life. That's one way that I think we can use it.
Can you clarify when you say chart? Can you explain what that is?
Absolutely. Your chart is, I guess we could say, it's like a blueprint of your life. To create a chart, and we do it by computer these days, used to do it by hand, it has to do with the time of birth, the day of birth, and the place of birth. And we put that into the computer, and it calculates a personal natal chart for you. It's different from anyone else. We could say this shows us the blueprint of who you are and that type of thing. So if we're going to look at how is this job interview going to do, we would pull up that chart, which is your personal chart, and look at it and compare it with what's going on in the sky. the planets as they transit through the sky, compare that with your natal chart, and we can pretty much get a good feeling or sort of a negative feeling on how things are going to go that day.
So no two people would have the same natal chart.
Identical twins would have the same natal chart, but even identical twins are usually born a few minutes apart. And even that could affect the ascendant or the moon. Even being born just a few minutes apart could change things.
Oh, that's interesting. And when you mentioned Neptune, can you explain that a little bit further? You mentioned that if someone was, did you say born in Neptune in their chart?
Well, we were talking about if someone is born with their moon, which represents your emotional life, in a square, which means a square is a difficult angle to your moon. Well, Neptune, we think of Neptune as the planet of illusion, delusion, confusion, lack of clarity. It can be one of the greatest planets, or it can be sort of one of the most self-deceiving planets as well. So anytime you're born with what we call a hard aspect, which means it's kind of a difficult combination with Neptune, then a lot of times you're going to have a lot of trouble, seeing things clearly in whatever area of your chart that falls.
Which one could you be born in that is like amazing? If that question makes sense.
I think a lot of people are amazing. I think that
where it's easy for them.
Well, I think if you were born with a lot of trines, which are easy aspects, I think in some ways your life can be easier. There is a configuration called a grand trine. And this is where we could say 3 planets are sort of harmoniously placed in your chart. As a matter of fact, some of the, I'm trying to remember right now, of course, anytime people are always interested in the royal family of England. And anytime, someone is born, I look at the charts, and I think maybe George was born with a grand trine, if I'm remembering it correctly. Now, everybody born with a grand trine isn't going to have as great a life as that. It just means you kind of flow from things. The negative side of being born with something like that is that maybe things are so easy that you become lazy. So a grand trine is a good thing to be born with if you're willing to sort of work on it. There are people born with that just really don't do a lot. Sometimes I have seen people with some of the most difficult charts, and squares and oppositions in a chart are considered the difficult angles. And sometimes they're really successful people, because when you're born with a lot of harsh aspects in your chart, you have to work harder to overcome, and you sort of develop a different work ethic or something like that, because you have to work harder than, say, somebody born with a grand trine. And of course, being born with a grand trine isn't going to guarantee a wonderful life. I actually was born with a grand trine in water, and I think I've had my share of problems. But, when I look back on it, I think in certain situations, maybe I've been luckier not to get caught up in some of the negative things other people have. But it sure doesn't mean you don't have to work in life. Sometimes you have to work more, in a way, with that.
Oh, okay. That makes sense. I was like, is there a group of people that's like just having it easy peasy?
I don't think so. I think everybody has their troubles in life, no matter who you are or how lucky, you were at birth.
This is a form of helping people?
Absolutely. It's a form of helping people. And the way I look at it is, my job, the first part of it is, I try to maybe warn people about certain things. And there's a lot to warn people about today. I was looking at a chart the other day, and it was somebody who had a job interview coming up, and it looked to me like there could be some kind of traffic or car problem. Minor thing, but it could turn into a big thing if you screwed up the interview and didn't get there or something. So I said, I don't know. It just looks like a problem with transportation. So if I were you, I would really start out earlier than what you planned and she called back and said, traffic was unbelievably bad. I almost didn't get there starting an hour early. I said, well, good. I'm glad it worked out. So I think that I think a lot of people want to know things like that. And I think a lot of people want to know, when is the time that, I can make more money? When is the time I could, meet somebody that I like? These are a lot of the things people ask.
I was on the website and I see that there's like an area that says skills and methods. And I was wanting to ask, can you go into what is the clairvoyant?
The clairvoyant has to do with being able to sense and pick up on things in the future. On the website, we have just about everybody. I always say there's someone for everybody. Mm-hmm. There are, clairvoyants, which means you can pick up on the future events. We have mediums who can connect with people who've crossed over, this kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And there's I always say there's somebody on there for everybody. There are many different categories of people: tarot, spiritual readings, astrology, different types of astrology. I always say there's somebody for everybody on there. There are many different ways of approaching, reading someone's life. Of course, mm-hmm. My way is through astrology, depending on what it is you're looking for.
We talked about like how it can impact our lives, and in what ways has it benefited you in your personal life? Do you do like astrology on yourself? Is that a thing, or does someone else have to do a reading for you?
Well, I'm like other people. Every now and then I, like to get a reading from another astrologer, maybe just to get a different perspective on things. But pretty much I can look at my own chart. I think sometimes when you're looking at your own chart, you want to keep an open mind. Sometimes I can maybe get a little bit negative if it just comes to looking at my own chart and things turn out really a lot better than what I thought. But I think it's helped immensely. If we go back to, say, the bank crash of 2008, I knew something was coming. I knew that it would affect me because I was seeing it in so many different charts. So I saved some money, thank goodness. And that was a big help because, as you know, in 2008, we went into what they refer to as the Great Recession.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember that. It impacted a lot of people.
It impacted so many people, and it was really interesting and a little bit scary, I guess, because I knew that we were probably headed for a big recession. And I'm going to say maybe 65-70% of the people, there would be something in their chart that would show me job problems, money problems, or something significant that was going to become a sort of a life-altering kind of thing.
Are you seeing that now in people's charts?
I am. And, of course, this year, there's so many things going on this year. The last few years, astrologers have been talking about, what's coming. Of course, now in 2020, it's crystal clear. About 2017, I started really seriously looking at it, maybe even a little bit earlier than that. And it looked like we had a Saturn conjunct Pluto in the sky. And this, of course, this affects the whole world. And that is one harsh kind of transit. So as astrologers, we can go back and we can look at, what happened before. So the last time we had this was in the sign now was 1518. And at that time, speaking of Christianity, Martin Luther broke away from the Catholic Church and started the Protestant religion. And of course, that was a big deal for about 300 years. There was a lot of back and forth at that time with it. That was one thing. They also had what they called the dancing plague at that time. So looking at that, we could get a pretty good, picture. Of course, now here we are, and the Catholic Church isn't the power structure like it was at that time. It was, the political power structure as well. So today we're having a lot of issues, you might say, with the political power structures. So that's part of it. And of course, every 40 years or so, we're going to have a transit like this. The last time was in the 80s. And of course, what happened at that time in 1980, 81, 82, that was really the beginning of AIDS. And and of course, then I decided, hey, let's look at the Spanish flu in 1918. And well, we had big similarities. We have actually big similarities right now. Matter of fact, within days, got another transit like that had to do with the Spanish flu, with AIDS, and it looked like there was going to be a lot of restriction in the world. And of course, now we can see exactly how that has played out because everybody's at home.
Are you able to identify that this is going to last for like 18 months or 2 years?
Not a lot of people are talking about how long it's going to last. I think we're going to have instability for 2.5 years. It looks to me like America really won't be stable until about 2023. And I think a lot of the changes in the long run are going to be good changes. In terms of COVID, it also looks like we've got something coming up in January, and it might be a vaccine. I don't really know exactly what it is, but we do have something coming up at that time that's going to benefit public health. And if it isn't a vaccine, then it's going to be something else that will benefit public health. And I think we're going to have a lot of changes in other areas as well. And I don't think it'll be over. I don't think COVID will be over. I think it, will probably go on in some form for quite a while. I really think we're going to have a lot of social unrest. I think through the social unrest, we're going to have changes that in the long run are going to greatly benefit us as a country and as a world. It may not be completely smooth getting there, but I do think we'll get there. And I think the world will be a better place as a result. I think it's going to be a lot different. And I think the majority of people are going to, demand change. And I think they already are, but I think it's going to get to a point where if change isn't forthcoming, there's going to be a great deal of social unrest that's going to sort of force it, you might say. I really think that we're coming into a different kind of a revolution.
It seems to look like that to me.
Yeah, it and I think it'll be, in the long run, I think it'll be quite good.
I seen where it looked like things were happening around the world, and yes. I've never seen that before.
I write about things that are coming up, and all we can do, is look at the news to, verify some of these things. Sometimes they're in the news, sometimes they're not. If they're not in the news, it doesn't mean it didn't happen.
Right.
But you can get really overwhelmed with the negativity. And so I had to go to watching old movies instead of the news. Now it's kind of, I don't know, I feel pretty balanced about it because I do believe that some of the things are highly negative, in the moment. But what I really believe is that we're going to have a better world all the way around as a result of these things. So in a way, that's, how I find balance. And I think we also have to just always be focusing on our own life to an extent. I mean, we're part of the world, but we have our own corner of the world. And no matter, what's going on or how many demonstrations or confrontations or whatever, is going on, we still have to, life is short, as some of my teachers used to say. I think we have to focus on making the most of our own corner of the world, along with being a part of the world.
That's so true. When we're talking about astrology, you pull up the charts by entering a person's information, but how does that work when it's for the world?
We can look at where the planets are right now, and that's how we look at the world. For example, this eclipse we had last night, it's at 0 degrees of Cancer, and I think there are some positive things that are going to come, from this eclipse. I think we've already seen a few positive things happening. And if it's at 0 degrees of Cancer, that means it hits the world point, which is 0 degrees of Aries. So that means that some of the things coming up over the next few weeks are going to affect us all to an extent. I think certain things are happening. We're seeing, landmark legal decisions. That was one of my predictions. We would hear, news of courts. And of course, we heard that the people in, that are under the DACA program can stay. So that affects a lot of people. Whether you know it or not, we're all affected by the world and the world we live in. But we also have our own chart, our own personal chart that, just goes into our own personal life. But you can sort of look at where the planets are and you kind of get a snapshot of what's going on in the world at any given time.
Are we in a recession right now?
I think we are. And, technically, I guess they came out and said we are the other day.
Oh, I missed that.
Yeah, they came out and said, we're officially in a recession. And when you've got Saturn and Pluto together, and Jupiter and Pluto, as far as that goes, together in Capricorn, which is a very heavy kind of thing, you can sort of glean from that, well, probably going to be in a recession. Not only that, every time that Saturn has gone into Capricorn, which is about every 30 years, I've gone back and looked at the last century, basically, and I think that every single time that Saturn was in Capricorn, we actually had a recession, because Saturn is just, so much. Saturn is heavy. It's always going to be in some sign. It's always going to fall somewhere in your chart. Saturn sort of shows us, what our restrictions are, and I guess you could say life lessons are, and things like that. But every 30 years, Saturn is going to go into Capricorn, and over the last 100 years, we've actually had a recession every time this has happened.
You mentioned Capricorn. That's my birth sign.
Okay. Yeah. Have you had a very busy and unusual year?
Yeah, definitely. There's a lot of things that are different about this year in my life.
Yes, absolutely. So you have Saturn in your sign, and it's on your sun, or it has, or it will be at some point. Saturn was on your sun a couple of years ago. Let's see when that was. I've got my book here. I'm just kind of looking.
So when Saturn's on your sun, that's like your rough period in your life?
Yeah, it can be a rough period. This goes back to 2018.
Yeah, we had some tough times.
2018, and going back to actually when Saturn actually enters Capricorn.
When it enters, how long does it stay? Is it years, or is it like
2.5 years? So yeah, 2018, Saturn was on your sun. I can go back to September. So September of 2018 and even before September of 2018, Saturn would have been on your sun. So we say Saturn conjuncts your sun once every 30 years. There can be some difficult and heavy things that happen at that time. Not only that, though, there's always another side to it. I think you can begin things that, can have a very lasting effect on your life as well. And I always say when Saturn conjuncts your sun, in some ways over the next few years, you sort of recreate yourself. And sometimes it's what you do. So I'm a Cancer, and when Saturn was in Cancer 14, 15 years ago, I did recreate myself. I guess it was a little bit longer than that. It was probably more like 18, 19 years ago. And actually, I started my business at that time, and it's still here. So it can be kind of heavy. And on the other hand, some positive things can come of it as well. But either way, you're talking about, some substantial changes when Saturn conjuncts your sun once every 30 years.
Yeah, this year for me, it definitely has been different. I don't know, like right now, I'm just like really happy in my life and I'm at a good place. And so I don't know.
Saturn has crossed your sun. Okay. A couple of years ago, Saturn, you're an early Capricorn. So Saturn has moved across your sun. Whatever you were meant to learn or do, you've already done.
Yeah.
So being a Capricorn sun, Saturn will change. Well, Saturn is in Aquarius right now. So what it does is it's in a sign for 2.5 years, but there's usually a period. In this case, it started in March, where it goes into the next sign for a few years. So it's in Aquarius now. And in a few days, the first part of July, it's going to go back into Capricorn for the next 6 months. And in December, it's going to go into Aquarius again for the next 2.5 years. So Saturn in Capricorn has changed things for a lot of people, obviously. And it's kind of, more about the material world, power structures, things like that. Now, when Saturn goes back into Aquarius in December, things are going to change, and it's going to be more about the collective, like it has been over the last few months. Over the last few months, we've had all these protests. The collective is making its voice heard, and it will continue to do that, starting in December. I think we'll have social upheaval, but I think the social upheaval will lead to change for the betterment in many ways of the world.
We need that.
Yes,
we absolutely need that. Wow, it's interesting. So if I was reading my daily horoscopes, how much does that really apply to me, being a Capricorn? Most people that are into astrology, you know what they tell me? They say, hey, you're a Sagittarius, right? I'm like, actually, no, I am a Capricorn. And they're always surprised. And I always was like, wonder why.
I don't know. Maybe you have some Sagittarius in your chart, or maybe you're a Sagittarius ascendant. I'd have to have your birth information to really know, but there's bound to be a reason. On the other hand, you may have a Sagittarius ascendant, or you may have a Sagittarius moon, or you may have a Mars in Sagittarius that makes you come across that way. You've really got to take into account the entire chart, not just, you've got to look at the whole picture. That's kind of how it works. And in terms of newspaper horoscopes, some of them are better than others. It just depends on who writes them. Some of them sometimes can be kind of accurate, but a lot of times they're not. People who write the horoscopes for the newspapers, usually if you're going to write a horoscope, you've got to look at the moon. What is the moon doing that day? That's, unless there's some, big transit in the sky affecting that sign, it's kind of hard to, see that as a full, picture of your day.
Well, I mean, you were able to share about astrology with us, and I really appreciate that so much. What do you think is one of the most important things that our listeners here on Authentic Talk should know about astrology?
Well, I think the most important thing they can know is that astrology is real and it works. You can, check it out for yourself. Try it for yourself. Just find a competent astrologer who has some experience and give it a try. I have so many clients who start out and maybe they are skeptics. Well, I can understand that. But after a while, once they catch on to how it works, they're no longer skeptics. And a lot of them now study astrology, as a matter of fact. So I think that would be the most important thing that I could say. It's been around for thousands of years, literally. Somewhere between 30,000 and 10,000 BC, they found the first indications that, astrology was being used. Keep an open mind and give it a try.
One thing I can honestly say is that it is interesting, and we all can agree, whether people believe in astrology or not, that they all know their birth sign.
Absolutely.
I guarantee you that. And they all have picked up something, whether they admit it or not, and have read. Because even when I was growing up and it was considered as taboo, we still okay, let me read this, but I know I can't really believe in it. I personally believe that everything in this entire universe was put here for us for a reason. Because back in the old days, like you mentioned, people were looking up, Leslie, you know this. They were looking up at the stars. I do know, Leslie, that astrology does have a lot. It has something to do with our lives. We can pull from it. And I wanted to invite you on the show so that we could learn a little bit more and to find out what is it for the people that don't know beyond I was born in March, or I was born in May, or, and my birthday is this day. I was born in this year. And so I am a Cancer. I am a Capricorn. I'm Aquarius. That was the invitation to allow people to learn a little bit more and to understand that even if they were skeptic or believed it, whatever, that it is something that provides us information. If people wanted to talk with you or to find you so that they could have an astrology reading or one of the other things that we talked about that you guys offer, how can they find you?
They can go to www.keen.com, Keen, Keen, not hard to remember, and go there and you can find pages of people. There are literally thousands of practitioners, on the site. There's an astrology section, and you can look me up there.
All right. So Keen.com.
Keen.com.
Leslie Hale, thank you so much for coming on the show and for being a part of the Authentic Talks family. Was there anything that you wanted to add before we ended the show?
Well, let's just end it on a positive note. Everybody's a little bit scared today. I think that, through this time, we're going to learn a lot about ourselves. Some people are going to learn a lot about their families. There's good in every time. And I think we'll come out of this, and I think we'll come out of it stronger than ever.
I love that. It sounds good. Sometimes you've got to go through the roughness in order to get to the calm, right?
And to find the diamond in the pile of hay. Exactly.
Yes. Ooh, that was a good, you just gave me a visual. When you said that, I pictured a pile of hay and trying to find a diamond in it. And it immediately was like, whoa, could you imagine that?
I don't know where that came from, but
Leslie, thank you so much for coming on the show today. I really appreciate you. It's been a blast. I love talking about astrology and it was a nice talk with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
Wow, you guys, astrology. What'd you think about that? I thought that would be pretty cool to bring astrology to the platform where we're learning about it. I know that growing up, it was, like I said in the show, something that we were not really supposed to really be paying attention to. But I promise you, I don't know not one person that do not know what their birth sign is, or one person that don't understand maybe that the stars, everything's kind of connected somehow, and so I appreciate Leslie coming on and sharing her perspective on astrology and being so kind enough to answer my questions, whether they made sense all the way or not. I really do appreciate that. One thing that I love about this platform, you guys, is that I actually just get to be me. I get to ask those questions that I want to know. And so if there's anything that you guys want to ever know, or say, hey, why don't you ask your guest about this or that, you're definitely always welcome to email me, because one of the things I honestly can tell you is that all of the guests are so open, and they're open to answering questions. Anybody that you hear on the show that you want to know more information about, I can always get them to come on back, because they will be willing to do that, and I will be happy to have them. So you guys, I hope that you enjoyed the show and that you were able to learn a lot more about astrology. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. I'm Shantae with Authentic Talks.